The last thing I remembered was the warmth of the wine, slowly loosening the tension in my body, and the laughter of my friends blending with the music that spilled into the night air. I had always been the responsible one, never overindulging, never straying too far from my well-defined plans. But tonight? Tonight was different. I was reckless. I was free. It only took one bad decision, one moment of weakness, to send me spiraling into an entirely new life. "Marry me," he said, his voice thick with confidence and a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "Right here. Right now." His eyes, dark and intense, pierced through the haze of the night. He wasn't a stranger. I knew him. But I didn't know him, not in the way that mattered. He was Nathaniel Blackwood, the billionaire CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, and far too much of a man for me to even fathom standing beside. Yet here I was, in the center of a private, candlelit room, my friend's laughter fading into oblivion as I stood in front of him. And I wasn't just standing. I was saying, "Yes." "Are you sure?" My voice was barely a whisper, but he heard it, his smile widening. "Positive," he replied, the certainty in his words striking me like a thunderbolt. The next few moments passed in a blur, a whirlwind of vows, champagne, and a haze that was thick with both excitement and confusion. Was it the alcohol that made me agree to this insane marriage? Or was it something else? I couldn't remember much after the vows were exchanged, just the taste of champagne and a sense of finality that settled in my chest. But what I did know was this. I had married a man. The man who, according to every business magazine, was untouchable. He was everything I wasn't, confident, powerful, and far more experienced than I could ever hope to be. Now, as the morning light crept through the curtains, I opened my eyes and found myself tangled in satin sheets. The scent of his cologne lingered in the air, and I instinctively glanced to my left, my heart nearly stopping at the sight. Nathaniel Blackwood, the man I had married. My heart pounded, the weight of reality crashing into me. He was lying next to me, his muscular frame relaxed, a faint smile on his lips even in sleep. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. But no. This was real. The night before was real. And it wasn't just a drunken mistake. We had done something far more dangerous than that. I had tied myself to him. Forever. The panic started to rise. But then something strange happened. I noticed a small box on the nightstand, glittering under the soft morning light. A diamond. A necklace, with the most beautiful, intricate design. His voice, deep and warm, cut through my thoughts as he stirred beside me. "Good morning, darling." I froze. Was this a dream? Was this some kind of twisted fairy tale? Or was I now living a life I couldn't escape, a life filled with wealth and indulgence, but lacking in anything real? And just like that, the questions flooded my mind. Who was this man? What had I gotten myself into? I felt a stirring deep within me, a question that I knew I had to ask. What happens now? What would you do if you woke up one day and realized you had married a billionaire, completely unaware of how or why it happened? Stay tuned for the next part to find out what happens next, and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts. I woke up with a throbbing headache, the kind of headache that only came after a night of far too much wine, laughter, and unexpected decisions. My hand instinctively reached for the bottle of water I had placed on the nightstand, an attempt to undo the damage, or at least dull the ache in my head. But as my fingers brushed against the cold glass, the weight of my situation hit me all over again. I had married him, Nathaniel Blackwood, the man who had been a headline in every business magazine I'd ever skimmed through, the CEO who ran one of the most powerful corporations in the world. I wasn't prepared for this, any of this. But who was I kidding? I had barely been prepared for anything in my life. Before last night, I was just Emily Monroe, a 27-year-old woman with no significant direction, working in a soul-sucking PR job where my biggest success was organizing a charity gala that barely raised enough money to pay for the hors d'oeuvres. I lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place I could afford thanks to the lack of social engagements, family obligations, or any kind of luxury life. My world was small, quiet, and safe. Too safe, maybe. Then there was Nathaniel. Tall, dark, and brooding, with the kind of authority that had everyone in his presence frozen in awe. He didn't just command a room, he owned it. And he wasn't the kind of man you said no to. I'd met him once, years ago at a work event, but we hadn't really spoken. That didn't matter. In the world of billionaires, people like me were just there. Disposable. So how had I gone from ordinary PR assistant to his wife? I couldn't quite remember how things had escalated so quickly, but the one thing I did know was that this wasn't a random encounter. He had been keeping an eye on me for months. He knew my weaknesses, my history. I didn't know how, nor did I know why. But something told me Nathaniel didn't make decisions without a plan, without a reason. My phone buzzed from the nightstand. The screen lit up with a message from my best friend, Rachel. "Morning, Mrs. Blackwood. Just wanted to check if you're still alive. Was hoping for some scandalous stories, but I understand you're probably too busy adjusting to billionaire life. Let me know when you're awake for a full debrief. P.S. Did you sign a prenup?" I nearly choked on the water I had just taken. Did I sign a prenup? I ran my fingers over my forehead, pushing aside the growing panic. The answer was simple. I had no idea. Not even a vague recollection of anything legal from last night. If I was being honest, I couldn't even remember what we'd talked about during the ceremony. All I knew was that it had been quick, too quick, and there had been no denying it. I had married him. I could hear movement behind me, and the sound of Nathaniel shifting in the bed brought me back to the present. I turned my head to find him still asleep, sprawled across the sheets like he owned them. His dark hair was messy from the night before, but he still managed to look impossibly handsome even in the most disheveled state. He had everything: the looks, the power, the wealth, and now, apparently, me. My mind spun as I tried to wrap my head around the implications of what had just happened. How did someone like me fit into a world like his? How could I possibly be enough for him when he was surrounded by women who had everything I didn't? Then, without warning, Nathaniel's eyes fluttered open, and he turned toward me, a slow smile curving on his lips. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, his voice low, husky from sleep. "How are you feeling?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I found myself gazing at him, the overwhelming reality of the situation sinking in. I wasn't just some girl in a drunken night of mischief anymore. I was his wife. Was this how life was supposed to feel? Like you were standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast ocean, and not sure whether you were going to soar or sink? His smile widened as if he could read my thoughts. "I know this is a lot to process, but you'll get used to it, Emily." His calmness infuriated me. How could he be so at ease with something so insane? "Used to it?" I echoed, sitting up quickly, feeling the cool air hit my skin. "I don't even know how this happened. I don't remember agreeing to any of this, Nathaniel. You married me, darling." He cut me off, his voice smooth and confident. "You said yes in front of everyone, and I'd never let you take it back, even if you tried." I stared at him, trying to make sense of the words coming out of his mouth. There was no malice in his tone, but there was something else. Something like an unspoken promise, or perhaps a threat wrapped in the silk of his charm. "I never agreed to this," I whispered. "You just made me say yes." Nathaniel's gaze softened for a moment, and his voice dropped to a more intimate, serious tone. "Emily, I've wanted you for a long time. You think this is just a fluke, but I know exactly what I'm doing." That admission sent a ripple of something dark and exciting through my chest. He wasn't just a man used to getting what he wanted. He had orchestrated this, all of it. But why? What was his endgame? And most importantly, how long would it take before I realized that I was falling for a man who was twice my age and 1,000,000 miles away from my world? The morning passed in a blur. After our brief exchange, Nathaniel had insisted on taking me out for breakfast, something intimate at a place he swore was his favorite hidden gem. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just about food. It was about control. Of course, he didn't ask me if I wanted to go. Nathaniel Blackwood didn't ask for permission. He simply told me what was going to happen, and I followed. I felt like I had been swept into a current I couldn't escape, one that moved with such force that my small, comfortable world was quickly dissolving around me. I still couldn't understand what I was doing here. My life had been a simple one. Sure, I had dreams, big ones, but they felt light years away. I had no idea how to navigate a life like his, filled with power, luxury, and high society expectations. I was only just starting to understand how little I knew about the world I had married into. Nathaniel's car was sleek, the leather interior too polished to touch. He drove in silence, his attention completely focused on the road ahead, while I sat in the passenger seat, my hands clasped tightly together in my lap. Every now and then, I caught his gaze flickering to me, and each time, I felt a jolt of something unexplainable course through me. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was something more. Either way, I couldn't deny that I was both terrified and intrigued. We arrived at the restaurant, an exclusive little cafe tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The moment we stepped inside, heads turned. Not just because Nathaniel was a towering figure, but because the room seemed to recognize him as its master. The waitstaff immediately went into overdrive, anticipating his every need before he even had to ask. I felt out of place. My simple dress, the one I had grabbed in a rush, was suddenly too plain in comparison to the polished women sitting at the other tables. They all seemed to have a certain air about them, a confidence that came with wealth, and I was just trying to keep my hands from shaking. Nathaniel seemed completely unaffected by the attention. In fact, he almost expected it. As we sat down, he glanced at the menu and handed it over to me. "You should order what you want," he said, his voice too calm for my chaotic thoughts. "It's all on me." It wasn't just the food he was offering, though. I realized he was offering me his world, a world that I didn't belong in, but somehow was now entangled in. I picked the first thing that caught my eye, a plate of fresh, decadent pastries, something I would have never indulged in before. Nathaniel, however, ordered without hesitation the most expensive items on the menu, as if money were a trivial matter. His presence here was effortless. He was accustomed to this, while I was still trying to find my footing. As the waiter brought over our meals, Nathaniel broke the silence between us. "I'll be honest, Emily. I've been watching you for a long time. This isn't an accident. I knew I wanted you, and last night..." His eyes locked onto mine, intense and unwavering. "I didn't just marry you for the fun of it. I married you because I believe in us." A chill ran down my spine as his words settled into my mind. I couldn't tell if he was being sincere or if this was just part of his game, his smooth, calculated method of taking control. He wasn't the type of man to accidentally marry someone. Everything Nathaniel did was deliberate. But why me? "Do you understand what you're getting yourself into?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost tender. "This isn't a casual relationship. It's not something you can walk away from." I swallowed, the weight of his words pressing heavily on my chest. I had no idea what this was. I couldn't understand it. But I also couldn't deny that there was a strange pull between us, one that tugged at my heart, even as my mind screamed at me to run. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed again, this time with an unfamiliar number. I glanced at Nathaniel, who was watching me carefully, and then picked it up. "Hello?" I answered, my voice shaky. "Emily? It's Rachel." Her voice was high-pitched with excitement, but I could hear the concern lurking beneath it. "Are you okay? We need to talk." I felt a twinge of panic in my chest, my pulse quickening. "Rachel, Listen, I've been digging," she interrupted. "I know you probably don't remember much about last night, but this isn't some spontaneous thing, right? Emily, do you realize who Nathaniel is? You married him, but you don't know anything about him. I did some research, and let's just say, he's not exactly the perfect gentleman everyone thinks he is. He's got a past, a complicated one, and I don't think you should be so trusting." I froze. Nathaniel, who had been casually sipping his coffee, glanced at me when he noticed the change in my demeanor. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes narrowed slightly as if he could sense the shift in the air. "Who's that?" he asked coolly, his voice smooth, but the sharp edge to it didn't escape me. I hesitated. Rachel had just dropped a bombshell. What had she found out? "Just my best friend," I said, not quite able to hide the unease in my voice. Nathaniel didn't push further, but his expression told me that whatever Rachel had uncovered, he wasn't ready to let it derail his plans for me. "Rachel's just worried," I added weakly, hanging up the phone before I could hear her response. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel was right. I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea who Nathaniel truly was. That's when I felt it. The first real crack in the illusion. Something was happening. Something I couldn't ignore. And it scared me. The tension between Nathaniel and me was palpable, hanging in the air like a thick fog I couldn't quite see through. Every time our eyes met, I felt a swirl of emotions I couldn't understand. Excitement, fear, curiosity, and an unsettling sense of powerlessness. But I was determined to hold my ground. We left the restaurant in silence. The car ride back to Nathaniel's penthouse, a cold, quiet affair. I had my thoughts to myself, and he seemed lost in his own. The night before had been a blur, but now I was wide awake, alert, and aware of how far I had drifted from the life I once knew. I wasn't just married to Nathaniel Blackwood now. I was living his world. And it was a world I wasn't prepared for. The penthouse was a far cry from my cramped apartment. I had heard of people living in places like this, but nothing could prepare me for the sheer opulence that surrounded me. Every inch of the space screamed wealth, from the grand staircase to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. Nathaniel had shown no sign of needing rest, but I was exhausted. I had barely slept, and the weight of everything was starting to catch up with me. I tried to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest, but it refused to leave. As soon as we stepped inside, Nathaniel motioned for me to follow him to his office, a spacious, minimalist room that was impeccably clean and organized. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with leather-bound books that looked as if they had never been touched. On the desk, there was a small stack of papers, an expensive pen, and a laptop that probably cost more than my entire apartment. He sat behind the desk, his posture commanding as he opened the laptop, his fingers flying over the keys with practiced ease. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I hesitated for a moment before obeying, my nerves fraying with each passing second. Something was off. Nathaniel had been unusually quiet since we left the restaurant, and the longer I sat there, the more I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't fully understand. Finally, Nathaniel looked up, his expression unreadable. "I know this is a lot for you," he began, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it. "But you're here now. This is our reality, and there's no going back." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to understand. Why me, Nathaniel? Why did you choose me?" His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger, more like a mixture of something dark and something possessive. "You want to know why you?" he repeated, his gaze never leaving mine. "Because you're the only one who's ever caught my attention. You're the only one who doesn't play the game. You're different." I didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning. "Different how?" I asked, more to myself than to him. But Nathaniel's response was instant. "You don't care about wealth. You don't need me for my money or my status. And that, Emily, makes you dangerous. To me." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Dangerous? Me? Was he implying that I posed some kind of threat to him? The thought didn't make sense. I had nothing to threaten him with. What could I possibly do to this man who had everything? Before I could ask him to elaborate, my phone buzzed again. This time I didn't hesitate to answer it. "Rachel, Emily, you need to listen to me." Rachel's frantic voice came through the phone. "I've been digging into Nathaniel's background, and I found something big." My heart skipped a beat. I glanced at Nathaniel, who was watching me with an inscrutable expression. His jaw was clenched, his gaze piercing. Was he listening in? "What did you find?" I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. Rachel's voice lowered, as if she were trying to keep it a secret. "Nathaniel Blackwood doesn't just run a company, Emily. He's involved in some dangerous things. His past is dark. There are rumors, Emily. Rumors that he's not who he claims to be." I felt my stomach drop. What was she talking about? Dangerous things? Before I could ask for more details, I heard Nathaniel's voice from across the room, calm but commanding. "You're asking the wrong questions, Emily. Your friend is only feeding you lies." I looked at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. His voice had changed, colder now, more dangerous. But his eyes, those eyes, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just business. There was something personal here, something that went far deeper than I had imagined. "You don't get to decide what I believe, Nathaniel," I shot back, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. "I need to know the truth." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, and for the first time, I felt the full gravity of my situation. I wasn't just married to Nathaniel Blackwood. I was tangled in a web of secrets, and I had no idea how deep they went. Nathaniel's expression softened, but only slightly. "You think you want the truth, Emily. But sometimes the truth is a dangerous thing, and once you hear it, there's no going back." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was stare at him, trying to figure out if he was being honest or playing a game. "Go ahead," he continued, his voice low and almost soothing. "Keep digging. But understand this. You're playing with fire." The days that followed were a blur. I felt like I was caught in a storm, swept up by a current that was too powerful for me to escape. Nathaniel's presence consumed me. His insistence on taking control of every aspect of my life made it impossible for me to see a way out. But more than that, there was a pull I couldn't ignore, a strange combination of fear and desire that gnawed at my insides. I was falling for him, slowly, reluctantly, but surely. The tension between us only seemed to grow with each passing day. Every time I asked him about his past, about the rumors surrounding his business dealings, he deflected with ease. He never answered directly, always twisting the conversation back to us, to our future. He had a way of making me feel small and insignificant whenever I questioned him. It was as if I didn't have the right to ask, to dig any deeper. But the truth? It was something I couldn't ignore forever. And then, one evening, I found it. I had been sifting through documents in his office, a mix of press clippings, company reports, and personal files, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what Rachel had uncovered. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages of an old file, one that seemed to have been buried beneath piles of other reports. It was a business transaction, a series of payments to offshore accounts in countries I'd never heard of before. My heart pounded as I read through the file, my mind racing with questions. These weren't ordinary business transactions. They were large sums of money, payments linked to illegal activities, things like money laundering, black market deals, and untraceable investments. The blood drained from my face as I understood the gravity of what I was looking at. Nathaniel wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just some charming CEO with a dark side. No, Nathaniel Blackwood was involved in criminal activities, dangerous, illegal dealings that could ruin him if they ever came to light. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed. For a moment I thought I might pass out. My hand clutched the file as I tried to steady myself. Was this why he had been so evasive? Had he known I was getting too close? Had he been hiding this from me all along? Before I could make sense of it, the door to the office opened with a soft creak. I froze, the file still in my hand, my breath shallow. Nathaniel. He stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he saw what I was holding. I tried to quickly close the file, but it was too late. His gaze locked onto mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My thoughts were racing. How had he known? Had he been watching me? Did he know that I was digging for the truth? "Put it down, Emily," he continued, his voice soft but full of warning. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my fingers still gripping the file. "Is this what you're really doing?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and disbelief. "Is this who you are, Nathaniel? All this money, all this power, it's built on lies and crime." For a moment there was silence. He didn't speak, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't surprised. He had been expecting this. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said quietly. His tone was calm, controlled, but the darkness beneath it sent a chill down my spine. "You don't know anything about the things I've done to get where I am." "You think I'm just supposed to accept this?" I asked, my voice growing louder now. "You think I'm supposed to just ignore the fact that you're involved in something illegal? That you've been lying to me from the start?" Nathaniel's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I didn't back down. I stood my ground, even though every part of me wanted to run. "You're right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I've lied to you. I haven't been completely honest. But that doesn't change the fact that you're married to me now, Emily. And you don't get to just walk away from this. Not anymore." My breath caught in my throat. His words were like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just manipulating me anymore. He was claiming me. In that moment, I realized how much power he had over me. I was tangled in his world, and there was no way out. "You think I want this?" I asked, the words spilling out of me. "You think I wanted to be involved in whatever this is? You think I chose this?" Nathaniel didn't flinch. "You're here now, and whether you like it or not, you're a part of this world, my world." There was a finality in his voice that left no room for argument. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear myself away from him and his twisted world. But deep down, I knew something else, something I wasn't ready to admit. I didn't want to walk away. Despite everything, despite the lies, the betrayal, the dangerous web he had woven around me, there was still a part of me that couldn't resist him. I wasn't just falling for him. I was already in too deep. The days after the confrontation in Nathaniel's office felt like an eternity. I couldn't shake the image of his eyes, dark, intense, and unwavering, as he claimed his hold over me. The weight of his words echoed in my mind every second. "You're a part of this world now." It should have terrified me. But instead, I found myself drawn to him in a way that felt like a slow burn, impossible to extinguish. I hated myself for it. But the more I pushed him away, the more he pulled me in. Nathaniel had insisted that I stay at the penthouse for the time being. He didn't say it like an order, but his eyes told me that there was no real choice in the matter. I could fight it, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. I had already been consumed by him, whether I liked it or not. He still hadn't explained the full extent of his business dealings, but I could feel the walls around him closing in. There were days when I saw a flicker of something more vulnerable beneath the surface, a tiredness in his eyes, a heaviness in his posture. But whenever I asked, he would shut me out, retreating behind the walls of the powerful, confident CEO he wanted everyone to see. I spent my days aimlessly wandering through his penthouse, trying to make sense of my thoughts, my feelings. It wasn't just the legal troubles that weighed on me. It was the emotional toll. Nathaniel wasn't just a man who had lied to me. He was someone who had woven himself into my life, into my heart, in ways I didn't fully understand. The more I tried to distance myself, the more I realized how much I craved his touch. When he was near, I felt everything: desire, frustration, confusion, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't untie. I could hardly breathe when he was close to me, yet I didn't want him to leave. Was it Stockholm Syndrome? Or was it love? One evening I found myself sitting alone in the living room, staring out over the city, my mind racing. I hadn't heard from Rachel in days, and I was starting to worry that she might be getting too caught up in her own life to check on me. She had been my anchor, my sounding board through all of this, and now I felt more isolated than ever. I stood up and paced the room, my thoughts consumed by Nathaniel's secrets, the darkness that lingered beneath his polished exterior. I needed to know more. I had to understand what was going on in his life, because nothing was adding up. And if I didn't do something soon, I might lose myself entirely. Just as I was about to reach for my phone, a voice broke through the silence. "Looking for something?" I turned, startled to find Nathaniel standing in the doorway, his figure framed by the soft glow of the hallway lights. His eyes were unreadable, his expression guarded, but there was an intensity to him that sent a wave of unease through my chest. "I was just thinking," I said quietly, trying to steady my breath. "Thinking about everything, and about what you said the other night." He stepped further into the room, his gaze softening. "But just for a moment. You're still upset about that." "Upset?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Nathaniel, you're hiding something from me. I'm not asking for all the details, but you can't just expect me to pretend everything's fine. You can't just say, 'You're part of this world now,' and leave it at that." He looked at me for a long moment, and then, with a sigh, he moved toward the bar and poured himself a drink. He didn't offer one to me. "You really want to know what this is?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "The truth? The truth is that you're in over your head, Emily. You don't belong here. I don't belong here. This..." He waved a hand around the room, the penthouse, his life. "This is a lie. A big, ugly lie that I've been trying to keep hidden for years. But now it's all starting to unravel." I stepped back, stunned by his admission. I had known there was darkness in his life, but hearing him say it, really say it, felt like being slapped awake from a dream. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me?" I asked, my voice cracking. Nathaniel's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Because I didn't want you to get caught up in it. I didn't want you to be hurt. I thought I could control it, keep you away from the truth. But I was wrong. I never should have brought you into this mess." I shook my head, the sting of his words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. "But you did, Nathaniel. You brought me in the moment you said, 'I do.' I didn't ask for any of this, but now I'm here, and you've made it impossible for me to walk away. You made me a part of this world." For a long moment there was silence. Nathaniel didn't speak. He just stood there staring at me, as though he were seeing me for the first time. Maybe I've made a mistake, he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made my heart skip a beat. Maybe you should have walked away the second you had the chance. I didn't know what to say. His words stung, but there was something in them that felt like an apology. A desperate one, but an apology nonetheless. I wanted to reach out to him, to close the distance between us, but something held me back. I don't know how much more of this I can take, I whispered, my voice shaking. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything's okay. Because it's not, Nathaniel. And you know it. The sadness that passed over his face almost broke me. I never wanted you to be a part of this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But now that you are, I'll do anything to keep you safe, even if it means losing you. I stared at him, the words hanging in the air between us. The truth, the darkness, the pull I felt toward him. It was all becoming too much to bear. And in that moment, I realized that the real question wasn't whether I could stay or leave. It was whether I was strong enough to love someone like him, knowing the cost. The days following Nathaniel's confession felt like a turning point. I couldn't deny that I had never been more lost. I didn't know what to believe anymore. My mind was a swirling mess of doubts and emotions, torn between my own fears and the undeniable pull I felt toward him. I spent most of those days in a haze. Nathaniel kept his distance, and I let him. His actions were unpredictable. One moment, he'd be cold and distant, and the next, he'd look at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I didn't know what to make of it, and I certainly didn't know where I stood anymore. But in the midst of all the uncertainty, one thing became clear to me. I wasn't going to let myself drown in this. I couldn't. I had spent my life playing it safe. I had built walls around my heart, convinced myself that if I kept my distance, I could avoid getting hurt. But now, I was in too deep. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. I stood at the window of Nathaniel's penthouse, staring out over the city, trying to make sense of it all. The view was breathtaking, the lights twinkling like stars below me. Everything I had ever dreamed of was right there. Power, luxury, excitement. But it all felt hollow. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself. It was his life. And I was still just a visitor in it, someone who didn't belong. But as I stood there, I realized something. I wasn't just here because of Nathaniel's world. I was here because of us. Whatever else he had hidden, whatever secrets and lies he had buried deep, the one thing that mattered was that I had married him. And no matter how scared I was, no matter how much he had hurt me, I wasn't ready to walk away. I wasn't ready to give up on what we had, even if it was built on shaky ground. I was stronger than I had ever realized. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this penthouse weeks ago. I had changed. I had learned things about myself, about love, about what it meant to trust someone even when everything in your head tells you not to. And most of all, I had learned that I wasn't going to let fear control my life anymore. Nathaniel had made his mistakes, but so had I. I had let him control me, let him make all the decisions for us. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I turned around, finding Nathaniel standing in the doorway, his eyes scanning my face with a mixture of hope and caution. I knew he was waiting for me to say something, to either give in to the chaos or walk away. But I had no intention of running anymore. "Emily," he said softly, his voice low, "I didn't want this for you. I didn't want to drag you into my world. But now that you're here..." I walked toward him, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know you didn't, Nathaniel. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not after everything we've been through." His eyes softened, and I could see the vulnerability in them. The walls he had carefully built. The fears he had been hiding from me. But now, I could see through them. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I replied, my voice firm. The mistake would be walking away now. We've come too far. And I'm not leaving. I'm choosing to stay, Nathaniel. But you have to choose me too. I saw the tension in his shoulders ease slightly, the harsh lines of his face softening. I've always chosen you, he murmured, his voice raw. I never knew how to show it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayals, the secrets, the pain, but also the love that had grown between us. There was so much we still had to face, so many challenges ahead, but I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Nathaniel wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But we could find a way forward, together. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect, I said, my voice steady. But I want to figure this out with you. I want us to have a future, even if it's messy. I don't care about the money or the power. I care about us. For the first time in a long time, Nathaniel smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. The kind of smile that made everything feel like it might just be okay. You really are something else, Emily, he said softly, his eyes full of admiration. I never thought I'd find someone like you. I felt a rush of warmth spread through me at his words. Maybe you didn't know what you were looking for. Nathaniel took a step forward, closing the distance between us, and before I knew it, his arms were around me, holding me tight. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax into him, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. We were both broken in our own ways, but together, we were stronger. And that was all I needed to know. I'm not going to hide from this anymore, he whispered in my ear. I'm going to fight for us, Emily, no matter what. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead to his, and for the first time, I believed him. The days that followed were the most intense I had ever experienced. Nathaniel's declaration that he was ready to fight for us changed everything. The walls between us began to crumble, and as each layer of his guarded heart fell away, I saw him in a new light, a light that wasn't just filled with shadows and secrets, but with a desire for redemption, for something real. But redemption didn't come easily. We were still living in a world of danger, one that could explode at any moment. And even though Nathaniel had promised to fight for us, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was something bigger, something worse, just around the corner. It came faster than I expected. One evening, as I was going through the endless reports on Nathaniel's desk, trying to make sense of the businesses he had built, my phone buzzed with an anonymous message. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the words, "You don't know the whole story, Emily. Nathaniel's past is coming back for him." The message was followed by a link, and despite my better judgment, I clicked it. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. It was a news article from years ago, one that had been buried, but now resurfacing with alarming clarity. The article detailed the disappearance of a business partner of Nathaniel's, a man named Adrian Carr, someone who had been in the business world as long as Nathaniel. The article mentioned that Adrian's death had been ruled as an accident, but there were details in the article that didn't add up. One line stood out, haunting me. Carr's ties to illegal organizations were rumored to be the cause of his death, but there was no evidence to link him to Blackwood Enterprises. I felt my stomach drop. Could Nathaniel have been involved in Adrian Carr's death? Was he hiding something even darker than I had imagined? I didn't have time to process it. The front door to the penthouse slammed open, and Nathaniel's voice echoed down the hall. "Emily, where are you?" I shoved the phone into my pocket, trying to steady my racing heart. What was I going to say? How could I confront him with this information when I wasn't even sure what it meant? I turned to find him standing in the doorway, his face taut, eyes wild with urgency. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice strained. It's not just business anymore. It's personal. It's dangerous. And you need to be ready. I swallowed hard, my mind a whirl of confusion and fear. What do you mean? Nathaniel, what's going on? Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, the kind of knock that sent a shiver of dread up my spine. Nathaniel's face paled, and he immediately moved to the door, his every movement tense. I stood frozen, my eyes locked on him. Who's there? He glanced over his shoulder at me, his expression dark and unreadable. Stay behind me. Don't move. My heart raced as Nathaniel opened the door. Standing in the doorway were 2 men, dressed in dark suits, their faces stern and emotionless. I could see the tension radiating from Nathaniel, and for the first time I realized that this wasn't a normal confrontation. Mr. Blackwood, one of the men said, his voice cold. We need to talk. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't good. Nathaniel stepped aside, letting them in. They walked past me without a glance, heading straight to the living room. Nathaniel's jaw clenched, and I could see the muscles in his shoulders tense, like he was preparing for a battle. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling. Who are they? They're associates, Nathaniel muttered, his eyes flickering between me and the 2 men. I didn't want you involved in this, but it's too late now. Before I could ask what he meant, the men began speaking again, their voices low and threatening. Adrian Carr isn't dead, Mr. Blackwood, one of them said, his tone heavy with meaning. And if you don't fix this, you'll both pay the price. I felt my blood run cold. Adrian Carr wasn't dead? The man whose name had been linked to Nathaniel's darkest secrets? The one whose death had been shrouded in mystery? Nathaniel's face hardened. I didn't have a choice, he said, his voice raw with regret. I didn't want this to happen. But I couldn't let him destroy everything I worked for. I took a step forward, my confusion turning into anger. What do you mean, destroy everything? I demanded. What did you do, Nathaniel? He turned to me, his eyes full of pain. You don't understand. Adrian knew too much. He was a threat to everything I built. And now it's all coming back to haunt me. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. What does that mean for me? For us? Nathaniel's eyes flickered with something, guilt, fear, and determination. It means we have no choice but to face what's coming. And you need to trust me. You need to trust us. I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could speak, the door crashed open again, this time with even more force. Another man, tall and dangerous-looking, entered the room, holding a briefcase in one hand. His eyes locked onto mine, and then he turned his gaze to Nathaniel. Mr. Blackwood, the man said, his voice low and menacing. The game is up. The room was thick with tension. I could feel it suffocating me, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest as the door slammed open again. Nathaniel stood frozen, his eyes flickering between the 2 men in front of him and the newcomer who had just entered. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched at his sides. Mr. Blackwood, the man with the briefcase said, his voice laced with something far too calm for the situation. The game is up. I could see the shift in Nathaniel, his shoulders tensing even more, his gaze narrowing with a mix of anger and regret. He moved toward the man with the briefcase, his steps calculated, his face betraying nothing but determination. What do you mean it's up? Nathaniel's voice was low, tight, and his words had the bite of someone who had been through this before. I don't owe you anything. The man with the briefcase didn't flinch. You think you can just walk away from this, Nathaniel? From the consequences of what you've done? He tossed the briefcase onto the table between us, and it clicked open, revealing documents, old, dusty, and marked with red warning signs. This is evidence, Nathaniel. Hard evidence of everything you've been hiding. Your past, your business deals. It's all in here. I stepped back, feeling my heart race. The truth I had been searching for was finally laid out before us, but I wasn't sure I was ready to see it. What had Nathaniel done? And how deep was this web he had spun? Nathaniel looked at me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and resolve. It was in that moment that I realized he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for us. "I've spent years building something," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But everything I've done, Emily, I did it to protect the people I care about." He stepped forward, closing the distance between us, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "I was trying to protect you too. I didn't want you to get tangled up in this, to become a part of a world that could destroy everything." The words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to scream at him, to ask why he had kept me in the dark for so long. But as I stood there, looking at him, I realized the truth was more complicated than I had thought. He wasn't just a man playing at power. He had been caught in his own mistakes, in a world that had trapped him, just like it was now trying to trap me. The man with the briefcase spoke again, his tone changing. "You don't get it, Nathaniel. You're in too deep now. This isn't just about business anymore. This is about survival. If you want to stay alive, you need to make a deal. You need to fix the mess you've created." I glanced at Nathaniel, my chest tight with the weight of it all. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he looked at the papers, his face tight with the strain of what was happening. "What kind of deal are we talking about here?" Nathaniel asked, his voice cold, his confidence returning. The man smiled, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You know what we want. You've been part of this game for years, Nathaniel. It's time to pay the price." I didn't understand everything the men were saying, but I understood one thing. Nathaniel's world had never been as simple as I had imagined. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about survival. And for the first time, I realized that the danger was real. It wasn't just a story. It wasn't just about him and me. There were consequences, and they were coming for both of us. Suddenly, something shifted in Nathaniel. He closed the briefcase and looked the man straight in the eyes, his expression cold and implacable. "No," Nathaniel said firmly, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "I'm done running. Whatever happens next, I'll face it. But I won't play your game anymore." The men froze. I could see the tension in the room reach its peak. I knew that whatever was coming would change everything, but I also knew that Nathaniel had finally made his choice. And so had I. I walked up to him slowly, my hand finding his. "We're in this together," I said, my voice steady, the words tasting like both a promise and a vow. "We'll face it together." Nathaniel's eyes softened, a hint of relief flickering in his gaze. For the first time, I saw the man behind the powerful CEO, the man who had been buried beneath all the lies and the secrets, the man who was finally willing to be vulnerable. "We are," he said softly, his grip tightening around my hand. And just like that, I understood. We were going to face whatever came next, not as separate people, but as partners, as equals, as two people who had found something in each other that couldn't be broken. The men in the room exchanged glances, but they didn't move. It was clear that the ball was now in Nathaniel's court. He had made his choice, and so had I. "You can't escape the consequences, Nathaniel," the man with the briefcase said one last time, his voice carrying a mix of frustration and admiration. "I'm not trying to," Nathaniel replied, "but I'll be damned if I let you destroy what I've built, what we have now." As the men left, their promises of vengeance hanging in the air, I turned to Nathaniel, finally understanding the weight of the world he had been carrying. We had our challenges ahead of us, no doubt, but the one thing I knew was that we would face them together. And that was enough. After everything Nathaniel and Emily have been through, would you have stayed and fought for a future together, or would you have walked away from it all? Let us know in the comments.